Fraga, que beat é esse, hein?
G'day, listeners, and welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Matter Mentality podcast, where we talk all things training, nutrition, and psychology to maximize your performance. Today, I am joined by another very special guest from way across the pond in the Great White North, beyond the ice wall, amongst the White Walkers. For everyone who watches a little bit of Game of Thrones, the guys, the wildlings, if you will. You guys could stay up north and do your thing with your truckers and your political legislation, everything going on up there. You guys are living the dream. Joined by fitness coach Brando. We made our big connection through Paulie, actually. So another special guest and good friend of this podcast. Managed to link up the Coach Catalyst Summit as where we seem to make all of our friends, which is great. It's always a nice little networking opportunity thanks to Cav, Kane, and Trev, who have also been on the podcast. So, my friend, thank you for joining me in the middle of snow and winter and negative 200 degrees and whatever else is going on in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's actually not that bad up here right now. It was like, do you guys do Celsius?
Yeah, we're like the normal rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah, true. Just you're not America, thank God. So yeah, it's like plus 10 right now. Not bad
Oh, shit.
for December in Canada.
Yeah, that's all right. I think it was like Lake Michigan, or no, the Chicago Bay was like frozen over, like literally like the frozen rivers of hell. And I was like, oh, cool, that's cool. That's nice to see. And Australia's like at the moment we've been having like 38 and 36 degrees Celsius days.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
kind
Australian summer. That's our
of
Christmas,
yeah,
baby.
yeah. I do a couple clients down in Australia, and they've told me like essentially like the seasons are flipped like compared to how we would
Yeah,
perceive them in Canada, and like they're telling me about like barbecues on Christmas and stuff like that. And
yeah,
like the white Christmas, it has its perks. It's pretty, it's nice, it's
yeah,
idyllic in a lot of ways. Man, having a barbecue on Christmas,
yeah.
I could sign up for that, and I could do that for a long time.
We like mum will get out. We've done it every year for like 32 years, but yeah, you get like the barbecue comes out. You got all the like the fried grilled meats, roast vegetables. People are sweating in the kitchen rather than being frozen. Like that's how it kind of goes. Like ours is a lot more muggy and humid than it is cold and snowy. But it's kind of like every single American I spoke to, it's like we want to flip it. Like me and Brooklyn really want to have a white Christmas. Every American I spoke to is like, I'm so sick of white Christmas. It's snow, it's annoying, it's wet, it's cold. I'm like, yeah, but when you've done flies and mosquitoes and 40-degree Christmases that come in with tropical thunderstorms, it's like, let's do something fun.
Yeah, yeah. We'll trade you next year.
Yeah. We won't actually link up. We'll just go over there when you come over here.
Yeah.
Right. Let's get started with this. We're going to have a really great conversation. Hey, we just had a great conversation. I think it was really clear when we linked up and connected. Unfortunately, we didn't get to train because, well, the schedules were just horrible between when we were there and when everything was open. But we had some great conversations and managed to have some great chats around the way we both view online coaching, the fitness space, the coaching space, our philosophies around those things. So the main point I think of this conversation is really to help the end listener understand more about the online space as both a coach wanting to get into it. So I think people rush to the online space and they rush to want to be an online coach and an online influencer, having never done the groundwork. And B, the client end where I find that some people really struggle with understanding what the responsibility of a client actually is. And yes, we have our onboarding process and we take people through it and make sure that everyone's aware of what the expectation is. But that kind of execution, I think, is lost in the early days, especially for someone like if you've got a first timer that's an online client, if you've got a first time competitor, like they're not quite sure yet of how it's going to work and what to expect. So it leads to like some incongruences, some misunderstandings, lack of data, etc., and that accountability kind of slips. So I think this conversation is really going to help people understand what that online world is like and what you need to expect from it. Because we both operate in that space pretty heavily, and that's our realm. It's our bread and butter. But before we head down that, give us a bit of backstory. I know we've talked already in person many times, but you've competed, you're jacked as shit, you love to train. Give us a bit of that background to what got you to online coach. I think there's always a nice, interesting story in people's backgrounds as to what type of philosophy they coach with. There's always something in that background that gels and mends into that philosophy. So hit us with a little bit of that. Give us a bit of understanding about you as fitness coach Brando, and how that's kind of led to hey, you're competing, you train, your lifestyle, and your pursuit of wanting to be a good coach.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, so like when I actually got into fitness originally, I was actually in university. So I got into it kind of late. Like I enjoyed athletics as a kid. It was always like fun. You know what I mean? Like it was always a game. So it was always something I was drawn to, but it never really had a purpose. In university, it it became something with a purpose. Like it helped me to stay out of trouble was essentially like the big thing. And then the other piece of that is I basically came home. I would have been like 2 years into university, and I came home, and my mother had got into fitness, and she got into it hard to the point where she'd been working, like a essentially a desk job for like 30 years. She was a high performer, she was crushing it, and then just leaves that job and decides I'm going to become a professional athlete and goes hard. And she actually went to the CrossFit Games, I think twice, competed there. So she was pretty badass. I come home and I'm 140 pounds because I'm a university student and I have no food and all the money
Ramen
went
noodles.
towards partying and ramen noodles. Yeah, so it's not exactly jacked. Come home and my mother's got striated delts and a six-pack abs, and she's deadlifting like at this point she was deadlifting like 315 or something like that. Like she was always a strong deadlifter, but it's like crazy stuff. Like to me, coming home from university, it seems.
Mhm.
So she kind of started me down that path. Later on, I ended up getting into some coaching. She sort of like involved me in that, and I ended up coaching at just like a Good Life, which I don't know if you guys have Good Lives there, but they're basically like our Globo gym, like Canada. It's like they're very dominant. Ended up coaching there, so I ended up working with a lot of people who were very, like common folk, right? Like they weren't particularly invested in athletics at any point in their life, but they wanted to make these changes for themselves. And I resonated with that because I had been basically a person who just played video games and did school and had friends and like normal stuff. And like fitness hadn't at that time quite taken over such a large piece of my life.
Yeah.
Eventually it did. Uh, and and that's why I think the online space for me has been such a uh, rewarding and yet challenging space to be within. Because while I was coaching for people in person for a decade, at some point the people who I was serving, they did become a bit more on the athletic side.
Mhm.
And when I got into online coaching, I found that I was appealing not only to people who had already had a certain amount of athleticism and a certain amount of focus in the gym, but also a lot of people who had like none.
Mhm.
And at first, it was quite challenging to put myself back in their shoes.
Yeah.
And once you're able to actually do that and you start to make that shift, like these people are incredibly rewarding to work with because they make
Mhm.
such big shifts in such a short amount of time. And there's something to be said about like working with people who are going to be like deadlifting 500 pounds and performing highly and competing and stuff like that. Amazing. Uh, but I find it just as rewarding when I'm working with a
Mhm.
person who's I've never even considered that I could have this for breakfast and not this. And then they start to see that they're losing weight and looking better in a shirt. And they've never even considered that losing weight was something that was like really possible for them.
Mhm.
And with just a few changes, like you're kind of changing their life. So it's pretty exciting. And yeah, I think I got a little bit lost into the weeds there, but that's essentially like how I got into coaching, how I got into fitness, and sort of the people who I want to work with by and large.
No, I think that's good though in regards to kind of getting lost amongst that detail because it builds us an understanding of the different philosophies that go into coaching. Unfortunately, I see, and I'm curious what your thoughts are here, but I see a lot of coaches kind of rush from being like a 10, 20, 30,000 or 30K influencer social media to I did my first comp, now I'm going to compete and I coach only comp prep athletes. But if I take a Gen Pop client generally it's like they'll apply the same brush, the same strokes of every brush to the same people. And it's like, if you don't fit that bill, you're a bad client. If you don't do exactly as I say, you're not accountable. And it kind of lacks that nuance of actually understanding people. It lacks that nuance of like, just because you're X personality type, you're the X coach type, doesn't necessarily mean that you're only going to get those clients. And so I find with people that rush to that online space without having that background of people, understanding even the basics of individuals, we struggle with getting, kind of that quality personal touch to coaching. And it just becomes like an online, like, yeah, the online space kind of becomes like that money, not a money grab, but yes, a money grab. Like it's just kind of like, how can I churn out $12 programs or $20 programs and just kind of, not not only make an impact, but more so just try and take a dollar. Whereas like for you, hearing that philosophy, that understanding that value, I see why it matters to you. And I think that's an important aspect of like that humanistic approach to coaching that a lot of people can lose. So I think it's not so much a getting lost in the weeds. I think it's important understanding someone's coaching background as to the type of people that they are and the type of people they want to impact and the way they coach. So I'm curious what your thoughts are there around like, that rushing from not so much rushing, but some people just don't even bother with that face to face phase first. They just go straight from that, kick off, first touch of the ball, first run, first play, whatever you want to call it. And then straight to online coaching, having never had that humanistic experience and that sort of soft skill of rapport building and coaching. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's actually it is interesting, and I do see those people who do that. I've seen them personally in my life, and you want to be encouraging towards them, but you also want to say like, hey, like, have you really considered like how deeply you're about to dive into something that maybe you're not either ready for or haven't really considered like how you would really approach this, like where can you succeed
Mm-hmm.
in this? And that does speak to me because for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think I'm very much the opposite. I'm very, very slow to decide like I'm ready. And I
Mm-hmm.
know there's some stat out there that says like you need to know essentially 20% more about a subject to be considered like an expert in that subject by somebody who knows essentially 20% less, right? And for you to be able to educate them and teach them, which is pretty neat. Um, but I've always been like the kind of person who like gets a certification, for example. I got my certification to be a PT, and it took me 2 years before I decided, like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to apply this to other people. And there are a lot of people who are just like immediately it's the first thing
Yeah.
they do, right? Okay, well, I'm certified. In fact, they often get the job and then they get certified afterwards, uh, and they feel like they're good to go. And I don't really resonate with that type of person. The type of person can be a bit off-putting to people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I gotta say, like it from my perspective, it's kind of a G move, like to just be like, I'm ready. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
good to go. And then yeah, there's gonna be a lot of people who fail in that, but there's gonna be a lot of people who are in my camp who just waited too long
Yeah.
to do a thing, who are also going to fail. Maybe it's because they have a certain self-doubt, or maybe it's because they just didn't didn't act fast enough to put in the time to gain the experience and the appreciation of what they were doing to actually be successful in this pursuit. So yeah, I think there's like, unfortunately, it's kind of a gray area spot, right? You kind of have to know yourself. You have to understand like, what type of person am I? Am I rushing into something again? Have I done this before? Or in
Mm-hmm.
my case, am I waiting too friggin' long here to like actually start applying this and starting to see some progress in people? And the same thing, I did the same thing when I came into the online coaching space. I was holding back for so long and waiting for so long. And then I ended up having a conversation. Unfortunately, I had Paul's guidance, and I had a conversation with somebody at the gym who was like, "Hey, like, I've been doing CrossFit for 4 years, and I've been thinking about coaching these people, but I don't think I'm ready yet." And it's like, "Are you certified?" "Yeah." "Are you level one, level two?" "Level two." "Oh my God, okay." Um, how much more do you think you know than somebody who's starting today?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh, that's a good point. And I was like, yeah. So like, I don't want to say it's being selfish, but you're holding yourself back
Mm-hmm.
from offering this thing that you have to offer this person, which will make them 100% better. And consequently will make you, 5% better, 2% better, whatever. And then you can elevate yourself at a later time and coach another person if that's what you desire. Um, so yeah. And then you're right though. People will lose perspective on like the human touch of it if they approach it very much like you say, like a cash cow or like a money making machine. And it's tough with social media because you see those people succeed. You do,
Yeah.
right? You look around and you're like, you can probably name five off the top of your head who is like, I know this guy will only work with X, Y, and Z because they're an easy mark for him or whatever. Or it's just like at the same time, maybe that's his strength. Maybe that really is his strength, and that should be where he's pouring his efforts. And if it works for like him, fantastic. But he's probably the anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
And the hundreds of thousands of people who are following him and trying to like sort of replicate what he's doing are likely not to see that level of success. And if they could take a step back and say, okay, this is what this person's doing. Maybe this is why it's working for them. But who am I and what's going to actually work for me? they'd probably see a great deal more success. I saw this when I went to Coach Catalyst. I saw this when I was working with Paul and Olivia, and I was like, I don't see myself filling the space that they're filling. And it was kind of disheartening at first until it was essentially like, oh, you went to Coach Catalyst and you talked to tons of different coaches who are
Mhm.
seeing, various levels of success, doing things in very different ways, serving very different populations.
Mhm.
So you have to really make sure you get outside of that bubble and try not to pigeonhole yourself into like, I must be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You you have to be willing to like really be honest with yourself about what you can do to best serve people in this space.
The other important part, just running off that point alone, there is that I challenge every coach when I hear like, oh, there's a saturated market. There's so many coaches. Like, don't get me wrong, there are, and the quality of coaching varies. It's a spectrum of what we would call quality. It's arbitrarily defined by whose quality we're judging it on, what someone deems as quality service. But there, as that final point you made there is like just going to a coach catalyst, you realize how many different versions of coach there are and how many different populations, demographics, at target avatars that these people are serving. And I think it's when, when people get really caught up in trying to rush to be the bodybuilding coach. Like, it took me years to get my first prep client because I was like, I need to know about, the human performance side, the mental health side, the psychological side, nutrition, training, like all these extra certifications, like university degree, before I was like, I can handle the depth of coaching someone to a prep and do it well. But I think a lot of the time, like, we get gung ho and like, what's the popular trend right now to coaching, or what are people really like gravitating towards? It's like, I'm a prep guy. I compete, so I've got to do preps, and I can do prep. It's like I don't see. I don't. I'm curious. Again, it's kind of building to a question of curiosity around your thoughts, but I don't see Johan Blake. I don't see Usain Bolt rushing to be an Olympic level sprint coach. They were Olympic level sprinters. So it's like sometimes we get caught up in this idea that I'm a bodybuilding prep coach. I'm a bodybuilder, therefore I'm going to coach bodybuilders. And but you meet some of these coaches, you're like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And it's not a dig, like not trying to get any sound bites out of you here or anything like that. That's not how I approach the conversation. But it's just simply like sometimes there's so much population out there. There's so many people who need help, but we get caught up in like, what's the trendy thing to coach? Or I want to be known as this coach. It's like, have you tried servicing other people first? Have you like? I'm a big believer in sort of going broad, then going specific, or I guess you could say like narrow niching down. A lot of people just try and rush to like their first niche and be like, no, I'm this specialty coach, and they have the worst skills for that population possible. So it's like to me, I'm curious what your thoughts are there on, like it's rushing to a niche that you might not even serve. You might not best serve or be able to best take care of, best interact with, but because it's like, this is what I want to be known for, or like I think I'm a bodybuilder, therefore I only coach bodybuilders. You're limiting the people that can benefit from you. You're limiting yourself in the scope of building your own skill sets, your database, your knowledge, experience that you can pull from when you do serve future people.
Yeah, yeah, that is a challenge. I think everyone's going to have to face that. Like it sounds like you took quite some time to like really decide on prep. That was a large part of what you were going to do. I imagine you worked with like a pretty large variety of people leading into that time. I was very fortunate to have that experience because I came from, again, I did the like sort of private gyms when I was starting out, just working sort of under my mother. I did the Globo gym, right?
Yeah.
So pretty gen pop.
We
I did,
know
yeah, yeah. And then I did the CrossFit coaching, which was really great because you do get exposed to a lot of different people in there, of many different demographics, many different age groups, uh, very wide ranging capacities between these people because generally people who are like signing up for a CrossFit class, they're ready for a little bit of fire,
Yeah.
right? Whereas like, Gen Pop, you got to kind of light the fire for them.
Yeah.
CrossFit people get a bit of fire, which is great. So I've been fortunate, and I don't want to keep bringing this back to me, but I'm just trying to draw from my own experience here. Uh, I've been very fortunate because I had multiple different interests and I had multiple sort of different teachers in that time. I did the bodybuilding, I did a bit of powerlifting, not a lot, but a little bit, enough to understand the big three at least.
Yeah.
And I did the CrossFit time. I did Olympic lifting, and I've done some endurance sports in the past. I worked for a triathlon company, so it was inevitable. Um, so I had that fortune, and then I got into bodybuilding, sort of when COVID happened. And so now I've got a pretty good lay of the land of
Mhm.
different methodologies of coaching,
Mhm.
and I can speak to these different groups of people. So it really doesn't pigeonhole my coaching style down because I understand like multiple types, and it doesn't quite pigeonhole down like who I want to coach. Of
Mhm.
course, I still have my niche and I have people who I want to speak to most directly, but I can coach them in many different ways. So I don't have to try to push them to
Yes.
be to fit any sort of mold. It's like, oh, you like this style of training? Great. We're going to do a bit more of that. But I'm going to push you to do a little bit more of this because this is in line with your goals as well.
Mhm.
Right. So yeah, like you will limit yourself most likely when you start out. And I think that's kind of part of the process. Like it is kind of part of the growth process, right? Like my experience with, again, working with Paul and Olivia, I was like, holy crap, I have to be like these people and service this group. And it was not true. And I went to, I got to meet you at Coach Catalyst and at Super Coach and many other coaches who showed me that I was wrong. So if you want to, prevent yourself from like sort of losing perspective, from self-limiting, sort of like we were talking a little bit about earlier, get outside of your shell. And that can probably be a little bit harder to do for somebody who's doing the online coach thing, because what part of what attracts a lot of people to online coaching is, well, I have freedom over my time. I have freedom over my location. I don't necessarily have to leave the house every single day, do the 9 to 5 necessarily. And I think that becomes a bit of a trap where they're not leaving the house enough. They have to get out there. I think having at least some in-person clients, especially if you're new, and I would consider myself new. I'm in my third year, so like I still have a lot of growing and learning to do, at least in the online space. But having those in-person people who I still work with, they give me that perspective and they remind me, oh yeah, I'm not working with me. I'm working with this individual, right? They're not a piece of paper or a stat. They're like a human. And then going to events, going to Coach Catalyst, going to seminars, joining groups, people to kind of give you some perspective and give you some ideas as to maybe what you're doing right, maybe what you could do better.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like you. There's a few points you touch on there that I think are just fantastic reflections for like the new coach starting out. But would you say, in your advice, not so much like what you think is perfect, but more so in your advice, would you suggest? I know my path, like I went down this same pathway, so I kind of have my answers. But you're the guest we're bringing on the podcast. I'm curious what you think. Um, would you say that having that in-person coaching background, regardless of whether it's CrossFit gyms, commercial gyms, group fitness classes, would you say having that in person on the gym floor, on the ground, in the trenches sort of experience a prerequisite to moving to the online space? Just as a quick example of like where that I'm going with that question is like to me, building that soft skill of rapport between sets with someone and knowing how to communicate. If you struggle with communicating a cue or a skill in person, you're going to struggle online, in my perspective. So I'm curious where you fit there, as to how you kind of view that. Is it something that you think that a lot more coaches should do first? Do you think it kind of they're two different realms entirely? Does one lead to a better outcome to the other? What's your thoughts around that?
I think my bias would definitely be that you should do some in-person beforehand. Um, get into the online space for sure, because I think that the two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Correct. Yeah.
Like the way I would approach, or the way I do approach my business is I don't offer in person unless you already work with me online.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want that opportunity is because I want to give my best to my online clients right now, right? I
Mhm.
want to make sure that they are very much my focus, that they are getting like my full effort. And there's not somebody else who's like utilizing me in a way that wouldn't be necessarily fair to them or takes away from my ability to give to them.
Mhm.
So you can definitely combine the two, right? And I do, and I think to great success, especially for people if you're working with a population who doesn't have a ton of experience.
Mhm.
If you're working with like high level athletes, you're probably still going to have to see them in person, even then. And these are people who are like pretty darn well experienced, um, but you probably won't have to see them quite as often,
Yes.
at least my perspective and my bias there. So I definitely think having like you say, building up those soft skills is going to be huge. The ability to create relationships, the ability to communicate, the ability to understand what it's like for another person who
Mhm.
most likely doesn't have the level of experience, knowledge, insight, and sort of consistency in the gym, to
Mhm.
really know what hard training feels like, you 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 want to know what it's like to sort of be in their shoes. You want to sort of be there to witness what that is so that you can have empathy and really like realistically guide them. I've made that mistake. I made that mistake in the beginning a lot where I was like, well, of course you can do all this crazy amount of work I would do. No, no, not true. Right? Depends on the people you're servicing. And then the last piece of that is, I think, sort of ties in. It would be like, there's a lot of science-based lifting, and that's amazing. I no poo-poo to that, right? I think that's fantastic. I think like with anything, right, there will be people who lean so hard into it that they're just unwilling to let go
Mhm.
of every little nook and cranny of one scientific approach to training.
Mhm.
And so it's to fit into that box, then they really don't have another way to move. And you're going to have people that don't fit in that box 100%. So if you don't have that like in-person touch, that's those soft skills, the communication, the understanding of like who am I actually dealing with, because it's not me and it's not a piece of paper, this is a human being,
Mhm.
uh, then you're probably going to be self-limiting in that regard, and you're going to limit the amount of success you're going to have for yourself and for your clients. So in person, either do a lot of it before you start or offer it continuously as you start to build your online.
So kind of like, yeah, I see what you're getting at. And I think I kind of agree there too. It's we refer to it over here as kind of like a hybrid model, where you look at it more as like a hybrid between face to face and online. Usually, it starts off like some of the people that I've mentored, business mentorees, that they've wanted to move to the online space, but rather than just cutting off that point in their business, it's graduating the face to face clients that they have to the online system, make sure they build it out, get it ready, use it correctly, make sure they see the glitches in the system and how they can improve it, and then start to take, I guess, third party online clients, but they started off with in person, working with the person, getting into the trenches of it, molding some of them to the online clients while they were still seeing them in the gym, then, filling in the rest of the book with newer clients in the online space. So we kind of refer to it as like a hybrid model over here, but that's, the gist of it. Usually for me is where it works best. You're able to communicate effectively, you understand people, you start to realize that, like you said, I think, and you made a really good touch point there on evidence-based lifting. One of the things that always irks me around coaches with evidence-based lifting is you build from, in my opinion, you build from a base of evidence, right? That's 100% what we should do. Build from a base of evidence. At least everything should have a reason as to why you do it. And for me, a reason could be as simple as like a leg extension is an easy way to drive volume, high intensity, and low fatigue. So it fits at the back end of your session here. It doesn't need to be because I'm looking for the most lengthened portion of the rec fem and I'm trying to add 0.1%. Like it can just simply be there's a really good reason to drive volume in the quads. It's not as taxing as a squat or a Bulgarian or a lunge, but I'm going to be able to blow your legs up. It's a great pump to finish off. And I know no one that I tell to go to failure on a leg extension to finish off with struggles to go to failure. It's very easy to determine failure from a leg extension. So, as simple as that could be the reason why the evidence as to why I selected exercise. I think that's fine. I think that's more than enough to validate why a movement's chosen. I think where we go wrong in the coaching space, especially in this current wave of like evidence-based lifting, is you get those, for lack of a better word, there's autistic types. Like I'm autistic myself. Let's be very real. It's not like I'm dissing anyone here, but like you get those types very like the data says X, Y, Z. I'm type A conscientious. If you don't do this, you're training horribly wrong. And like you said, they kind of pigeon themselves into this narrow box where the textbook is determining their entire philosophy to coaching. But the very ironic thing is that evidence-based coaching also includes the evidence around coaching as a skill, knowing how to vary things for the person, knowing how to mix things up, knowing how that, this exercise might not be available for your client, or, taking time to set up the optimal bar path for a client that takes 45 minutes when they only have an hour in the gym available to them. It starts to become like, what evidence are you valuing more? To be, in my opinion, to be that good coach, we've got to have room to be flexible, adaptable, adjust on the fly. Like I need to be, in my opinion, have that coach, that the client available to call me, message me like, hey, gym's messed up. It's all over. It's New Year's. We're going to get to New Year's. It's New Year's Day. And it's like, winter has come and, there's next to no equipment available. What do I do? And you go, cool. We can just simply swap this out. Similar movement. This needs to happen. It's not going to be as optimal, but you know what? Get your volume in today, do this, and we'll modify it. If the gym stays this busy for the next 3 months, we'll probably just modify your program. Like
Yeah.
those are the type of things where evidence around coaching is more than just what the exercise science says. It's also what is the psychological evidence, what's the nutritional evidence, what's the volume evidence, what's the exercise selection evidence, like what's the application of your program evidence. Just because you write, I'm always a big believer, just because you write the world's best program, if no one can do it, it's a shit program. I'm sorry, it's a terrible program. So having that perspective, I think, is also something that we kind of lack currently in the online evidence-based community. It's very like, but it has to be 45 degrees on the leg extension seat so I get the maximum length of my rect fem. And it's like, relax. Most people aren't at that position yet to really stress about it. Like, I'm curious there again. I'm curious, mostly I'm bringing you on to be curious about your thoughts, but how do you see that? And you kind of touched on that last final point there, but I think it's a great point, especially as upcoming coaches and for the new people who are going to be clients. Are we really overstressing that? Are we kind of trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here?
Gosh, yeah, man. Again, I've been doing the online thing for again. I'm in my third year, so a lot of what you just said, I was getting flashbacks. I was like, oh, I've done that, right? And part of that, yeah, it's a bad replay. Um, Part of the reason why I had some of those sort of issues was because I did coaching in person for quite some time. I stepped away from it for essentially 3 years, 2 years, 2 or 3 years, while I was a police officer. So I just couldn't do both at the same time. So when I came back,
Wild. By the way, as a police officer.
yeah, yeah, it was in the big city of Toronto. And so when I came back, I had kind of like it's like you trying to remember how to do something, but like it's not all quite clicking. It's not like riding a bicycle, right? It's just not that easy.
Yeah.
When I came back, I had to rebuild a clientele, right? I
Mhm.
had to do those things. Um, and I was so used to working with people who I was like either competing beside or were naturally like more inclined towards athletics, which is amazing. Um, but I sort of forgot how to like bring my energy down or
Mhm.
talk to them at that level.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like, I'm not trying to like make it like, oh, I'm just above you. It's just like, I just happen to know more about this particular thing. I'm sure there's a million things, but many of my clients know much better than I do, but this is the thing I'm good at.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I sort of lost a little bit of that, and it made me do a whole lot of those mountain out of a molehill things. And I wasted some of my time, I wasted some of their time, but it's kind of part of the learning process.
Yes.
It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be smooth sailing. It's almost always going to be rewarding.
Mhm.
And as long as you're like ethical about it, right, and you're like coming at it from a place of like genuine care for these people and you're trying to do your absolute very best for them with the skills and knowledge that you have, and you're not taking them for a ride like race wise or something like that, and you're genuinely providing the best service you can, then you're going to do fine, and you're going to make a lot of those mistakes early on. I know I saw a lot of it even when I was doing CrossFit coaching, where it was like you get the person who hasn't improved like their clean and jerk for 2 friggin' years, but they're
Mhm.
still coming to class every day and they're still buying the best gear. They have the
Mhm.
best knee wraps, the best shoes. They do all the best recovery routines. They've got the leg compressors at home. They do an ice bath all the time, right? So I think it's very I don't and like I made those mistakes and I'm very open about them because I'm pretty sure it's just a regular human thing
Mhm.
that like you overemphasize the shit that really doesn't matter.
Mhm.
People do this with supplements, right? They're like, oh, I gotta have the right creatine and the right BCAAs, and if I don't have the right pre-workout drink, it's just I can't even really work out that day. It's like, yeah, you don't even get 7 hours of sleep. There's a big old question mark. When's the last time you knew how many calories you were intaking? What's your protein intake? You have no clue. Take care of some of that shit first, and then you can worry about your ideal optimized supplement routine. And all the power to you. But like everyone does that. So like
Mhm.
it's just a natural part of stuff. It's unfortunate. But you know what? Actually, I have one. I don't want to get too far away from this. I have an interesting question for you, I think, because I've come into this space
Mhm.
with no clients necessarily because I let everyone go and I came back in and tried to like rebuild that roster. So I never really had to take people who were in person and move them to an online, right?
Mhm.
Most people seek me out, they do the online thing, and then we do some in person if on an as need basis. When you moved people from your in person to online, because I think some people would be interested to hear this, is what was sort of the attrition rate?
So this is interesting because I failed my first business. So I personally myself didn't go from the in-person model to online model. I did a lot of work around with people that had done it, mentored some people through it. But I myself, actually, my first PT business, for a lack of a better word, I would say I would happily own up to the fact that it failed. I wasn't aware. This is where I went so heavily on, to kind of answer the question with good reasoning. It's part of what led me to the psychological approach to my degree and trying to understand clinical psychology. I was big on human performance, big on elite mindsets, big on high performing sport athletes. I was like, that's who I want to serve. But the other part of what I realized was inside my coaching in person, because I was, S&C called ASCA in Australia. I was S&C certified, did like, strength conditioning, programming, movement mechanics, all that sort of stuff. Um, I was struggling to get buy-in from clients. I was struggling to get them from what are we doing at home versus the 1 hour that I have you for.
Mm.
And I was very agitated. I did not like I might just be a mum's 45-minute gossip session. Like she might just come to me for 45 minutes to train, have a yarn, go home. I was like, I like I like working with you, but I'm taking your money and getting no result. But I know that I'm training you the house down. Like I'm killing you. What is happening? And it was just more and more of that. And then eventually got to a point where I actually moved. I realized I need to figure out more about the business side. I went to managing nutrition stores in Australia. So I managed several different multi-million dollar business nutrition stores here. Had a lot of fun with that. Did a lot of that. Took a lot of the business side, and then we restarted Matter. So I had a gap in between. I personally didn't take from X to Y, but the people that I worked with that did that, the attrition rate it kind of depends on the population you're in. So one of the things I found is if the population is general, like you're working with more gen pop sort of clients,
Yeah.
a lot of those people actually come. What I find, you probably have a similar experience, is a lot of the time that session is their breakaway from reality in life, and so they're not really looking for the online touch. They're looking for the like, man, some a large portion would rather spend the $60 to $70 for the 45 to the hour than go to see a therapist.
Mm.
They would rather do that and spend that and know that they're getting a trainer, whether it's someone fun and full of energy, or even like not to sexualize or politicalize anything, but I've had mums that worked for me when I was younger, and I was like, I was still jacked. I was training. My plan was to compete even back then. And jack's a loose word. I was definitely smaller than I am now, but there'd be commentary on like how I looked or what my lifestyle was like or what I did because of how I looked, and like part of why they came was for that reason. I'm going to assume. Part of the
Yeah.
other reason was simply they just want to be gossip, train hard. I had men coming to me that they just want to get away from their wives or their family for an hour. Yeah, we've all kind of been in that, had those sort of clients, and so those guys either drop off or you stay in that hybrid model. They stay face to face, and they're probably
Yeah.
never going to do the online basis. But
Okay.
in saying that, I've also had men that I did not expect. I started doing some work with Primal Zone, started working on the men's health side of things. I started getting 45 to 50-year-olds that wanted to do online coaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, bit of a mixed bag there to answer the question for those who are listening and was curious. I unfortunately, I think I learned a lot from the lessons of not knowing business in coaching in Australia. Like I didn't do my taxes properly. I didn't know how to budget for like the highs and lows of Christmas and holiday periods and be my own employer. I wasn't paying my superannuation. I wasn't doing like my retirement fund. There's a whole list of things. Marketing, isolating my people. I was working hard. I was in the gym from 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then I would go do my business degree after the fact, or my business certifications after the fact. Like that side of things I did well. I just knew how to work hard, but I did not know business, which led me to going to do more on that side of things to get the knowledge and the expertise. And now I help consult businesses, I help manage businesses, I help give advice on business because I sucked. And I think that failure was almost necessary for me to be where Matter is now, because I wouldn't have found my people and who I serve best, but I also wouldn't have learned along the way how to serve them properly, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great story. I really like that. And yeah, we all have to suck. That's it. People can suck harder and longer.
Yeah.
No.
I won't even make the jokes that I want to make on that topic. But I think that's a really good point, a way to kind of move to our next point is people do suck. We do suck at things, and it's important to understand that. Dr. Peterson talks about it. Carl Jung talks about it with some of my favorite psychologists. Before you become the master or the archetype of the king, we have to essentially accept being a fool. We have to be willing to suck at first. We have to be willing to embarrass ourselves in order to master the thing that we're embarrassed about. A
Right.
lot of the
Yeah.
time, people get scared of even stepping their toe into the water to prove they can't swim. Well, how do you learn to swim if you don't get in the water? And that kind of, leads us down this very interesting time of year where people have done next to no lifestyle changes, lifestyle modifications. And this will be a great exploration, I think, of your philosophy. I think we share very similar, unique sort of approaches, but I'm very curious on how you do it here because it's going to be an interesting time of year. The New Year's resolutions, the New Year goals, the New Year, New Me, the whole gist of it. I think a large portion of who you serve are very Gen Pop based, unless I don't remember your market correctly. But I think it's very Gen Pop based, or like there's people who are wanting to improve, wanting to make changes, but you wouldn't call them high performing athletes or elite athletes. They're like those Gen Pops who are moving towards that kind of like making good change. How do you find this time of year? Because we look at the data, and I wrote articles and blogs on this for many years ago about it. I think within the first 80 days of a New Year's resolution, sorry, in the first 40 days, 80% of people have failed their New Year's resolution in the first 40 days. So you're looking at 6 weeks. What do you see in the Great White North side of things? But also, you're online, so you pretty much work amongst anyone. How do you see this time of year? Is it something you see a high success rate with? Do you even draw in more clients for New Year's? I know we actually don't draw in if we go through our leads and sales. And New Year's is not big for us,
Mm.
mostly because I think I drive home a really high level of accountability. And like you tell me your extreme goals, that's going to be what I lock you into. But I also want to see that action in play. And so I think a lot of the time when people, to me, a lot of people like to talk about a New Year's resolution. They like to shout it out loud, get the credit for it first. Then people get that dopamine rush from like the praise before the thing, which we know never really works. How do you see New Year's resolution, and what do you think people can do differently to improve should they have those resolutions?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great. When it comes to resolutioners, I mean, I doubt it's much different here than it is in any other part of the world, right? Most people have these lofty goals and these high resolutions, and unfortunately, most people they fail. Not too soon after the year begins. And one of the most common ones is seems to be related to fitness, to personal improvement, right? And that's a great thing. I think a lot of it comes down to the problem of like goal setting, right? People that will set a goal that often is very outcome based, which is in and of itself, I think, a bit of a challenge. Uh, but they also seem to be setting goals that actually don't really resonate with them or aren't the goal that they're actually looking for. They think it's this thing, but oftentimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so that's a bit of a challenge. I think a good example of that is people often talk about like, oh, I want to like lose weight and I want to get stronger. And say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like respect. And like if you're pretty new to the gym, you probably will. But like what is that like what is it really getting down to there? Most for a lot of people, like Gen Pop people, right? It I want to look better and feel better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is what it comes down to, right? Um, but because they haven't defined that, acutely enough, specifically enough,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't quite have enough purchase, right? So then it doesn't drive them to stay on top of things. And because it's a little too vague, it's hard. It seems so far in the future, so they end up sort of caving in. I do take clients in during this time of year, and actually this year I've seen a good intake of people around this time of year, so that's kind of a positive. I know here in Canada we're having a bit of a like an economic slowdown right now, but it doesn't seem to be affecting sort of the fitness market, or at least not on my end, which is great. And I think that could be like a byproduct. I think they call it the lipstick effect. Even when economic times are slow, people will still do things to beautify themselves and look better.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe who knows? Um, and then when it comes to keeping people motivated during that time, that's kind of the beauty of what we get to do in the online space is you can really apply like a very personalized touch to your work. Certainly, it depends, right? Like if you're, working with very high end people, then you're probably applying a high touch almost all the time. If you're working with Gen Pop, and I wouldn't say I'm necessarily Gen Pop. I'm like, yeah, there's some people who are like total like completely new to the whole training space, completely new to the whole dieting space for sure. But I've also got a lot of people who have like always been doing something in the gym, but just haven't seen the result they want. And they
Yeah.
have like a good underlying base of
Yeah.
athleticism. So generally my approach to those people is very much case by case, right? Like I know some clients that Christmas time, New Year's time, going away on vacation, they are crushing their macros. They are doing their workouts. They're upset if I even would infer that they should not do some workouts during a
Mhm.
vacation, right? Like they feel good. It gives them a sense of control and a sense of completion. Great, right? So I work with them in that manner. And then there's other ones who it's like, I know you. You're not dieting while you're on this vacation. We're not going
Yeah.
to a cut right now.
I
Like
know that you know that I know.
yeah, right. And they'll push back. They'll be, but I want it. And it's like, motherfucker, you're not gonna get it right now. Like you just it's not time, right? Like you are you, you want what you want. I respect that, but like I know what you need to do to get there, and we both know you're not gonna do that while you're on vacation. So bring down the stress levels. Let's just focus on what we can do while you're away, and it's all good. And it's the same with New Year's people, right? It's like what is really going to be the thing that moves you forward right now? Like I have clients who just like straight up, I hate New Year's because I don't want to be in the gym with other people. All right, what can we do to get you active outside of the gym for the next 2.5 weeks?
Yeah. You only got to do it for 2.5 weeks. It's fine. The numbers will dip.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, I'm so in agreement with everything you have said, and fantastic. I think it's a really positive reflection of a business when, even during economic struggles, I know, like I side sort of quest, I guess, is like part of my interest goes into like political history, political science, just out of I just like knowing. I like knowing the state of the world. I like knowing where things are and what's happening. If you were to go through my following account on Instagram, it's like as much fitness and bodybuilding as is like comics and nerd stuff, and then geopolitics and
Yeah.
political accounts. It's the most random thing ever. But I think it's a great reflection of a business when things can grow during economic struggles. Because a lot of the time, like you said, there's lipstick effect. There's also like depression cover. People use there's a famous quote that like the most effective business during a depression is a bar, because like people will generally try and suppress negative emotion with negative or what we call depressants. So they're going to amplify the depressive state by having depressive substances. So in one of the things that I've always said is like, I want to get to a point where my value that I give to clients, the value that I serve my people with is so great that it would be a struggle for someone to choose between me and paying their mortgage or me and paying for, the equivalent of someone trying to give up alcohol. Like if that is and I think it's a really positive thing to hear. Like we don't ever want them to do that, but it's like
Yeah.
to hear that, like, someone's like, I really don't want to give this up, but I've got to pay this bill. It's like, bro, I appreciate that. I'll take that. Like the fact that that's a struggle for you, brilliant. That was kind of like a side reflection there, I think, which is a really great point. Kind of what you're talking about there is you're very similar to us. You give a lot of value, you give a lot of insight, education. I can only imagine what your actual coaching service is like if the stuff that we see on social media is what you give away for free. Just like us, one of our highlights of the year was we gave away 100 hours of content for free. And if you go through all of our stuff, that's like, what we've kind of given over the year, where it's like, you didn't have to pay a dime. So like that to me, like you're very similar in that regard, which I think is fantastic. But one of the things you touched on there is again goal setting, but also understanding your individual client. And during this period of time over the year, I think I see a lot of people on social media and they get high and mighty on like the how dare you tell your clients to diet over Christmas, just one day, relax and enjoy it, let them go and just make memories, not macros. It's like there is so much personality and profile type to each individual client, athlete, like customer, whatever you want to call them. Each person needs its own unique touch. If you think from your grandstand of social media, you could tell every client ever to not track anything over Christmas or do anything over Christmas health related, I think we are playing a very dangerous game in what we're doing as coaches. Like they're coming to us for a service, for a responsibility, for a professional product that is to get them a result. Now that result might be like, I'm in prep this year. I planned my high day to be on Christmas. I had the same strategies that I give my clients. I live and breathe by them. The same objective goal that my coach gave me, which was be on track over Christmas because you're prepping, you don't have room to be, messing things up. I did the same things that I give my clients when it comes to holidays, if they're tracking or if they're on a diet. At the same time, I have clients that are in a surplus. I have clients that are on a maintenance phase. I have clients that are more like, I literally we closed the books for December to kind of lock in who we had. I started some new clients. I was like, look, Christmas is not going to be a time where we do a massive cut for you because you've never done a cut before, and I don't want you to start cutting or dropping deficits during the holiday period where and they're very socialized people. I'm like, this would be ethically questionable by me to put you through this right now. Next year when we're together and it's Christmas time and your wedding's coming up only 4 months later, guess what we're probably going to do? Stick to that fucking diet. We're going to stick to those calories, stick to that budget because that's what the phase requires. So, I really like the way you kind of describe there. And again, it's very indicative of what your model is, how it's similar to ours, philosophy and principle. You've individualized it per client. And that's where I think it's important to have that coaching touch is that we know that each person comes to us. Generally, it's of the same reason. They want to move forward. They want to personally develop, physically develop towards a specific outcome. But each one of those physical developments is uniquely and arbitrarily different. And that is how we have to coach them during this period of time. Like if you just simply go, hey, New Year's resolution, well, we're cutting all your food out. If this person's never done a diet before, if this person's never done a restrictive phase, a caloric deficit before, then just go, hey, guess what? All this food comes out. We're probably setting them up to fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably we're probably creating that limitation belief, that limiting perception of food. And they're going to go, well, I just had all this food over Christmas, just had all these, like, the holiday treats, the holiday events. And, America's huge for the different holidays over this period of time. And then you're just going to go, hey, guess what? We're going from 0 to 1,000 and you are going to have none of it ever again. Man, I've never seen that work for anyone. Yeah. How do you approach this, like the behavioral change side of things where you're looking at rather than saying New Year goal or resolution is to drop body fat or to lean out, we're going to cut all this food. How do you approach that more, I guess, like educational side, the empowering, if we look at self-determination theory, you would call it competence, proving the ability to execute and do something. How do you go about that with clients? As you said, you've taken a lot of clients at this time of year. How do you go about that? Obviously, very different goals. Everyone's going to be unique, but let's say someone is trying to lose weight or make that fitness resolution for 2025. How are you approaching that to not only get them to see the bigger picture, to get the result that they're motivated by or craving, but we're educating them for the sake of consistent, being able to sustain that goal and be able to basically, not only reach it, but be able to keep it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, the cool thing is that like most people, there's always something to work on, right? There's always some lever that can be pulled at any one time for them to continuously make progress or set themselves up for outsized progress later on, right? So if you're starting somebody who their real goal is, I want to lose weight, I have this summer vacation that I'm trying to set up for, but it's like they sign up right before the new year, or right before Christmas holidays or whatever. Yeah, you're right. That person, maybe they've got a diet history, maybe they don't, maybe they're completely new. And if they're completely new, then I think you hit the nail on the head. Like you'd be setting them up for failure by saying, like, okay, trial by fire, let's go right into it, right? Like,
let's go.
Yeah, they'd really, really, really have to be like, you'd have to have a pretty deep discussion. And I'm sure you've had them. I've had them with clients who's like, I want to go fast. And you're like, great, let's take a step back and like see, why is it that you want to do that, for one. For two, what do we really reasonably have to work with here? You're already working like a 45, 50-hour work week. What more levers can we have to pull? Or maybe we do, right? And like, that's when that communication aspect comes in. And like, that's a huge part of coaching. And again, another, I think, advantage that online coaching has to necessarily in-person coaching is that communications, the wheels are always moving in that regard. And then the other piece of that is we have to avoid the sort of like normalcy bias, right? Like thinking that this is something that I would do for myself through the holidays, right? I would push myself. Great. Not everyone's like that, right? Not everyone is you, and you have to understand that. And again, we talked a little bit about why the in-person stuff and not losing perspective is so important. So they're not going to be you, but there is always something to be worked on. And I mean, you, and I'm sure many of your listeners are hearing this now, and they can think of a time in their own life where it's like, I'm not able to, maybe I've got 3 levers to pull. I've got my training, my nutrition, and my sleep. and I'm not able to pull all three of those levers right now for various reasons in my life. And so you got to like dial some of those back. Maybe you go from training 5 times a week down to 4 times a week, right? Maybe
Mhm.
you're not able to meal prep quite as often, or you're going to have to move your meal prep around, or maybe you're going to have to eat an hour of sleep here and there, depending on like what's going on in your life, right? But you have to make those decisions and know that there's always going to be a trade-off, but that the trade-off, by and large, from a good coaching perspective, is something that is reasonable for this person to do
Mhm.
and isn't going to be such a sacrifice for them and their experience level that it ends up being off-putting or
Mhm.
overwhelming them, or is so soft that like they start to put the brakes on because they're like, oh, well, my coach is kind of putting the brakes on. I guess I'll just chill. End of the year, right? It's like,
Yeah.
no, you has to be, again, this is a person, they're not a piece of paper, but there has to be an approach that is like always specific to them, but always has their best needs in mind, right? Like, what are they actually trying to achieve here?
So if I were to, I guess like recap kind of the way you view it, we would refer to it as like the Goldilocks zone. So there's a concept of development and education. It's a famous Russian developmental psychologist, Vygotsky, and he has this concept called the zone of optimal development. And I kind of approach that with my clients as the zone of optimal motivation, optimal pushing. It needs to be hard enough that it challenges your current skill set and abilities, but not so hard where it's so perceived as outside reach that you're basically demotivated by the likeliness of failure. So like, we look at it as like I'm not going to tell you to track every gram of food on Christmas Day. We're going to say, can we portion out your plate to make effective choices? Are these choices going to take you towards your goal? I'm going to challenge you to do that. But what does that look like? Well, we've got a bunch of resources that you can go look at how to build a plate, how to what selection of foods to use, make some right choices, and then tell me how you did it. Did it make you uncomfortable? Did it challenge what you thought you knew? Did it make you feel better because you were making like how did it challenge you? But not so much where it's like, hey, in front of all your friends and family that you've never done this before, you have to pull out your scales and weigh your food and basically track every gram on Christmas Day. Like
Mhm.
it's got to be challenging enough where it's like, there's your current skill set, you're learning this new thing, but it's not so challenging that you're like, this is just never going to work. And going back to a point you touched on previously, it's like those outcome goals that people look at New Year's resolutions, where it's like, I'm going to drop 25 kilos in the next 4 months or before halfway to the year. It's like, cool. Where have you dropped 25 kilos in 6 months before? Oh,
Mhm.
never. In fact, over the
Mhm.
last 10 years, you've accumulated 30 kilos because every year you do the same thing and you actually spiral back and lead to gaining that weight. So this goal that you've set this year actually isn't realistic at all, or well, not just realistic. It's just super unlikely, and therefore you're going to demotivate yourself because it's not going to happen. What can we do instead? Well, let's make some more process and performance goals to lead to that outcome. And it's like again, that kind of sounds like the approach that you take, which I think is fantastic, and a lot of more people need to be able to do it. Is you need to communicate and challenge the client to a degree that forces them to get better, but not so hard of a challenge where it's like, well, you just don't want it bad enough. You're just a POS if you don't do this. Like you just, I guess, weren't that invested in yourself. It's like you went from telling them to do nothing to walking 15,000 steps, do 2 hours of cardio a day, 5 training sessions, and they're in a 60% calorie deficit. Yeah, they're probably not that interested in doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and the other side, like, is the person who's not willing to kind of apply that pressure, right? And that's what your client wants. They want to be led to a certain degree. They trust
Mhm.
you, right? Working with
Mhm.
you for a reason. So you do have to know when is the time, and it's something I when I take on new clients, I have them fill out like basically a form saying like, this is who I am. This is my experience as to like how I like to be coached and how I like to be spoken to. Here's how I learn best. And it
Mhm.
gives me a good insight into like how am I most likely to motivate this person going forward. Some people want to be told like, listen, you're fucking up. Like
Mhm.
figure your shit, let's go. Right. Some people want that. And then there's some people who is like, you have to have a bit more of a ginger approach. And that's okay. Like that's totally fine. And I'd rather know that up front about some people. And this sort of goes back to the piece about the goals, right? I think it's a good side note to that also is actually you were talking about like the outcome, and I mentioned the outcome before. If you want to lose 25 kilograms, what you actually want to do is be the kind of person who can lose 25 kilograms,
Yes.
right? Like you don't want to make $1 million. You want to be the kind of person who can make $1 million. Because if you're that kind of person, then you can do it again.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter what happens in the world, you can do it again. If you
Hmm.
gain the weight back, which you probably won't, then you can do it again,
Hmm.
right? And that's a lot more power there. Um, and again, this goes back to the concept of communication and goal setting. If you're somebody out there right now thinking about working with a coach, know that like the big component is going to be how much you can communicate with your coach because your coach knows what to do. By and large, they probably do. If you've vetted them well and you're looking at what they're doing, like you see they've got results for themselves and others, then they're probably at least going to be able to move you in the right direction. But they don't know necessarily everything that's going on behind your head, and they don't know everything about you and what drives you, what motivates you. So you have to keep those communication lines open. Ask as many questions as you can because they want them. Like I love when I have clients who ask me questions
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Oh my God, okay, let's do this thing, right?" And they're like, "Okay, shut up, stop." Right? So like lean into it. I've made that mistake with coaches in the past. I've made that mistake with business coaches, and then eventually it came to me. I was like, "Oh, like they're doing everything they need to do. I'm just not leaning into this hard enough."
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't know if it's just like the way we were all kind of like raised and educated. Like we were, you're put into a classroom and somebody has the itinerary and you just do what they tell you to do essentially, right? And you think maybe you feel like coaching is going to be the same way, but it's not because it's so much more personal than anything we would have gotten high school and junior high and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think that leads to a very important question that, yeah, we've talked a lot about kind of like, coaching, philosophies, goal setting, but there's that whole other component that doesn't really get brought up in the conversation. I think this is where a big aspect of people go wrong, especially that come new to the game or during this era of what I call like false mindset coaching, which is where everyone's nowadays a mindset coach because they did a 2 day course on a weekend. And they have the ability to talk about the depths of clinical psychology, which is mind blowing. But it's now this idea that it's not your responsibility or it's not your fault or like it's okay not to move forward or have coaches basically tell you to stop trying. And it was big in Australia and it was absolutely killing me because I felt for these clients where I wanted to serve them, but there was coaches basically taking their money to simply say you're great the way you are, don't do anything. No, you're beautiful the way you are, like fantastic, go you. And you would see these people go from month 1 to month 12 and they share these stories, but literally zero change had occurred. And like to the point where they're still making the same mistakes, but also the same indecision, the same hesitations, the same limitations, but also their physique wasn't changing. To me, I'm like, it's not empowering. Doesn't just mean that I'm empowering you to stay how you are. Empowering to me would be I'm empowering you to make the right decisions, the right choices, to educate and inform you to be able to make the decisions you want to achieve the thing that you want in life. So
yep.
to me, that's where we end up on this problem where it's not just about motivating you kind of as you talk about with pressure. It's pushing you enough where yeah, I want you to feel great how you are by all means, but I want to drive you to be better. I want to drive you to improve, and I want to drive you and teach you as much as I can to get the most out of you and help you achieve that goal that you want. That's my obligation to you, my responsibility to you is to help you achieve that outcome. That's what you come to me for. I take that. And with that, I think there's a part of that responsibility that people fail to understand, which is the responsibility of the client. And you kind of touched on it there before with like communicating, understanding, sharing. There is a role that is played in the coaching relationship, the duality of the coach and the client that is rarely talked about. It's always like criticizing the coach. It's always like if this result didn't occur, it's because the coach sucked. I've seen that across fields like bodybuilding preps. I've seen on stage, the coach didn't peak me correctly, but also I was only getting 5 hours of sleep and taking cocaine to get through peak week and doing stimulants to try and stay awake and basically not eat my food properly or ruin my digestion. It's like yeah, that's a very extreme example, but even going to Gen Pop clients who, and mind you, that happens in Australia, so but
Yeah.
for Gen Pop clients, for the average, that intermediate client where it's like, oh, I didn't think this was worth bothering the coach over, so I just kind of did it and then put in my check in 7 days later, but didn't really remember exactly what to put in there, so I left out a lot of detail. There's a responsibility on the client that has to be considered by the client that they are involved in the process. They are involved in the system. They're involved in the outcome. Yes, we are GPSs. We are going to guide you the best we know how. But if the GPS says go here and you take this route because you're like, oh, you know, I just want the scenic route, that's cool. But if you aren't communicating that, if you aren't exploring that with your coach, if we are discussing why that happened, there's a whole aspect of this relationship that is not going to work out, and the result likely isn't going to occur. There is a degree of ownership and responsibility that the client has to take, and I would love to know what you view as like those priorities, I guess, on the end of the client. What do you expect of your client to really help that relationship? Because, like you said, between you and me, we know what we're doing enough where even if I didn't have the most 100% sound knowledge, I know enough that I could get it moving the ball in the right direction. If we communicated, did the thing, and there was zero hiccups. There's always going to be hiccups,
Yeah.
but what are you looking for your clients where you want them to communicate that? Is it, every time there's a struggle, every check-in, is it, there has to be wins and losses. There has to be psychological feedback. What do you see as the positives, or I guess the successful traits of your clients, and what are probably the negative traits of your clients when it comes to check-ins, accountability, that relationship of ownership and communication?
That's a good one. Everyone, again, I get them to fill out that intake, so they sort of explain to me like what kind of communication style that they would prefer, which does help me quite a bit. But generally, like the more the better. Like what I often say to them is, fitness is going to impact all parts of your life, right? Whether that means you're somebody training for the stage, or somebody training for the next meet, or you're just somebody training to lose 25 kilos, right? Like all of those things are going to have a significant impact on aspects of your life, largely for the better. There are going to be challenges in there. It will be tough, right? And the struggles are going to shape you into a better person. It's going to be awesome, but it's going to be tough, right? So because these things happen, everything in fitness affects every part of your life. So therefore, every part of your life has some impact on your fitness. And so I encourage my clients to like share with me what you think is prudent, that you think I'm going to be able to aid you with, or even just something I need to know about you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's totally fine. There's very few things that are TMI sort of in this world, especially if you're you're coaching across genders, right? Like you're going to need your female clients' cycles and stuff like that. You're, like
Mm-hmm.
that's details you're gonna have to know. Male or female, you're gonna have to know how is the digestion, how are those poops going,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Especially if they're prepping or something like that.
Yep.
You're gonna need these details. So if you can, as a coach, ensure that you're creating an environment where your people feel very comfortable speaking with you, that you're not there to judge them, that you are entirely curious and interested in their lifestyle because you want the best for them, not because you want to wag a finger at them. One of the greatest compliments I ever got from one of my clients was, he's like, I go to a therapist for somebody to like get my mind straight. I can't remember his exact words. He's like, and sometimes I feel like I'm not doing everything they want me to do. And I feel like I'm like, it's kind of me versus them. Like I feel like they're upset with me, and it makes it a little less exciting for me to go for the next time. I'm like, that sucks. He's like, but like, I don't feel like that with you. Like, I feel like win or lose, whether I do everything perfectly or not, you're here at my side. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like we're a team and we're collaborating towards this thing. And like, oh my God, like, that was one of the biggest compliments I could have gotten, because I want that, because it is a collaborative process, like you brought up before, right? Like I can't lead a horse to water and make it drink, right? I can give you the skills, I can give you the knowledge, I can tell you what direction to go. But if we're going to succeed, we're going to succeed together, or we're not going to succeed at all. So that's my perspective on that.
I love it. No, I completely agree. I think that's a dictatorship versus duality. I think is probably one of the biggest problems in the coaching space. Everyone, not everyone, but people come into it thinking because they've seen like the Biggest Loser, or they've seen those like drill camp, boot camp, drill sergeant sort of like programs or experience where it's like, I'm going to get yelled at and abused by this guy if I don't do everything perfectly. And I need to have the same meals every single day and do it. And it's like, you're so far from needing that. You're needing someone who's just going to simply like, you know, for most people that I start out with, it's more basic guidance on like structuring their day, structuring their life, getting some basic foundational principles in there that we can sort of call scaffolding, right? It's like we're gonna scaffold off this skill, build a new platform, scaffold off that skill, build a new platform, just elevate you up over time, habit stacks, skill development, all that stuff. It's for lack of not making people sound dumb, it's literally building off developmental psychological skills and how they teach teaching. You take a skill and a principle and you help someone learn it, and then once they lock that in, you go, okay, what can I add to this? It's gonna be a little bit more challenging, a little bit more challenging. And that's as simple as it needs to be sometimes, but we get so caught up in this perception that coaching is just about like getting yelled at and like you're a SOB and a POS and like it's your fault. To a degree, like, yeah, let's take responsibility and ownership, absolutely. But there's a lot of times where it's just simply coaches, clients just need someone to believe in them for the first time, someone to believe that they can actually do it. They can do the thing. I believe you tell me this is what you're going to do. I'm going to give you the skills to get there. I'm going to make sure that we do it. But you got to put in the work to make sure it gets there. And I think that's where people kind of go wrong in the fitness space. They think just being that yell at you, oh, you weren't 100% spot on. Like, man, I'm not 6 weeks away from this client isn't 6 weeks away from stage. They're 6 years away from having ever felt good about themselves. Let's probably, chill that down a little bit and let's make like you said, and it's evident in the way your clients speak about you, the content you put out, the way you've just even spoken about your principles. It's let's be a team. And that I think is one of the coming from a team sport athletic background, coming from a lot of team sports, different types of team sports, it's hard in the coaching space to build a camaraderie of teamship or like that sort of like collaborative relationship. And if you don't foster it, it doesn't happen by itself. It takes work to build that culture with your clients, with your athletes, with your team. And so to have to get the best out of the clients that I've had, like you said, we want to have that TMI. We want to have that, what's the stool like? What's your menstrual cycle like? Is it heavy this month? Is it painful this month? Is it affecting your sleep? Is it affecting your hunger? I will always push my girls. And I'm sure you're the same way. I don't ever let my women tell me like their menstrual cycle is the reason that we need to change their diet or we can't train this week or this month or I got some of my girls with PCOS and they have endometriosis and they'll have flare-ups, but like, look, I did 2IR instead of FAO. Fantastic. You self-regulated, but you kept going. Oh, I made a few changes, some cravings I had more around red meat than I was around this sort of food, but I used to turn to chocolate. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's what I want to hear. And that way I know that I have the trust of my girls and my guys. I haven't been intimate with my partner in over 6 months. Well, guess what? You're probably more stressed than you are anything because you guys aren't intimate. It's a relational issue than it is a body composition issue. Let's deal with that. Let's take some time for you guys to be those sort of things where because you're open with me, because you trust me, and we have that relationship, I end up finding we make such a drastic change, not only their physique, but their life. And that is that is rewarding to me. I almost guarantee you'll be the same way, but I find in the pursuit of chasing physical development, I often become more of a life coach or a lifestyle coach. And the result of the physique is a byproduct of improving the environment, the life around them. That, because we built that relationship, I can understand their existence. And then with that, actually make the improvements to their physique.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that last point was really great. Like we want to look better, we want to perform better, we want to feel better. But this whole fitness thing, it's really just a vehicle for self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like any challenge that you're going to take on, however big or however small, if it's more than what you've done before, it's going to make you a better, stronger person. And it's going to bleed into all other aspects of your life. And you're going to look better naked, and you're going to feel better.
It's all wins, really.
Yeah.
Just be prepared for life of body dysmorphia if you choose to bodybuild. Mate, we've covered a multitude of things here, and I think these are the conversations that people need to hear. It's not a structured interview where I want to catch bait you into saying something. I wanted to have a genuine discussion about the world of what we exist in, and kind of like the pros and cons, the struggles, the positives and negatives in how we do things in kind of the space that we exist. It's unique, it's new, but it's not new. There are the snake oil salesmen in our field. They are the ones that want to grab and catch and clickbait and snake you in. But there's also the guys like yourself, like I would, positively say myself, where we're trying to do things for the best interest of the client ethically, but also achieve that result, still push them to be accountable and get that thing. So I do appreciate your time. I'm going to hit you with a couple of quick fire questions. They're kind of like a give me your three best answers sort of thing. So we are coming to the new year. We are coming to resolutions. If someone's going to come to you with a resolution in mind about fitness, about weight loss, about body composition, what are three things that you would suggest to them straight off the top of your head? They're going to help them achieve that resolution, even if they didn't sign up to you.
Get the buy-in of your closest people. So if it's a weight loss goal, a muscle gain goal, whatever it happens to be, tell the people that are closest to you who have the most impact on your life. Tell them how important it is to you. Get their buy-in because their support's going to mean a lot. Uh, Next thing is focus on the biggest levers that you can pull: quality training, quality nutrition, quality sleep. Don't worry about that other stuff until those three things are in place. And yeah, consistency is like whatever your goal is, define it very clearly and work towards it consistently because it's a physiological change, so it's not going to happen overnight.
I mean, perfect answers. They're your answers, they're perfect answers. What are three needs that you have from a client to work best with you? Meaning like what are the biggest three traits or metrics or feedbacks that you want from a client to really maximize their results, they'd be accountable to you?
Yeah, somebody who can communicate openly is huge. Um, Somebody who takes constructive feedback well, and this bleeds into the third one: someone who is very coachable, right? Who understands that I've come to you for a specific thing. I'm going to listen to you,
Hmm.
even when it's uncomfortable. I'll let you know, but then we'll have a conversation. So
Yeah, I love it. And I agree, being coachable is such an underrated, it's not as talked about as it should be as a skill. It's always kind of like we spoke about just previously. People come to the coach expecting the answer to be on their lap and like, oh, well, I paid you, you should give me X result. But they don't understand how important being coachable is to the outcome. It's such a trait that has to be honed and developed. And not everyone comes ready to be coached. They come, kind of like the Bruce Lee, if your cup is already full, how do you expect to learn and master a new thing if the cup is already full? I can't continue to pour water into your cup. If your cup is already full, you can't refill the cup. It will just pour out. So exactly, great point there. What is a book you recommend, whether it be for lifestyle development, physique development, nutrition, whether it's a coach in education, whether it be someone trying to improve their life, stress management, whatever. What is a book that you recommend people go away and read right now? Because we add it to our list after this conversation.
I just recently read Grit by, oh gosh,
Angel Ducksworth.
Neela Duckworth. That's it. I can like see the book from here. I recently read that my last trip to Phoenix. Really good book,
Totally.
especially if you're somebody who is again newer to the industry and you're trying to figure out your place
Mhm.
and if this is the right fit for you, and you feel maybe overwhelmed by all the flashy people on the social medias who are crushing it already. It's a good book for that.
Love it. Final question. It's refeed day, cheat meal, high day, whatever you want to call it. Everyone's got a different synonymous term for these sort of things. But what is your go-to meal, whether in prep or dieting, that you just like, I've got a day to eat, or one meal, we'll say one meal, not a day to eat, because we don't want to encourage binge eating. But what is that go-to meal that you are hooking into that is going to satisfy the urge?
So there's a place in Toronto called Gladiator Burger, and it makes some crazy burgers, like tall
Oh
burgers
yeah.
with thick slabs of crusted mozzarella cheese in there and stuff like that. You can put on Canadian bacon, pea meal bacon, all different types of bacons. So that's kind of a go-to for me. Go there and grab a burger, fries, maybe a milkshake,
Oof.
and just man, it's just so good. There's something about a burger and fries. It's just so rewarding. So that's what I go
What's
for.
what's the difference between Canadian and American bacon?
Canadian bacon, I think that's also called pea meal bacon, if I'm not mistaken. But it's that flat dish-like bacon, and American bacon's the nice long, crispy, grilly bacon.
Yeah, okay, yep. So we call that middle bacon rashers, and then the long, crispy, fatty bits that Americans use that we just call that the rasher, I think.
Really?
Yeah, something like that. We do that as well. I prefer the middle bacon pieces like that's like looks like that flat cut. We got American
Yeah.
bacon over there, and it's just like it's like hard, chewy, but crunchy as well. But it's like it's the fat bit. It's like I don't know, it doesn't do it for me.
You get it thick cut, like the thick cut bacon. It comes out a little juicier and a bit softer, but
Okay. Turkey bacon's not bad though, because when I found the macros on that bad boy, I was like, oh shit. All
oh
right,
yeah.
I can get around this. I can get around turkey bacon. Add some strips to like, my low days and just get the protein up without getting much fat up. That's not bad. That's not bad. Mate, thank you very much for your time. Like I said, the point of these conversations is to have a conversation, is to get information out there. I think a lot of listeners, whether it be coach or client, athlete, or getting into the coaching space, are going to be able to pull from this conversation. And that's why I think, us being a few steps ahead, like you said, just knowing that 20% more, we're able to give back and share to people. We've come back on. We've launched off the shoulders of giants, and I think it's our responsibility and position to be able to give back to others that are going to follow from us. So I appreciate your time. Drop any links or titles for us where to find you, any handles that you have, platforms you have, so we can send people your way and follow more of your stuff, Instagram content, YouTube, whatever you got. We'll put in the notes as well. So what are they?
Oh, sure. Instagram is just at Fitness Coach Brando. Same on TikTok and same on YouTube. So it's super easy. All three spaces, and that's it.
Love
Instagram's
it.
probably the one I'm most active on.
Love it, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us, brother. I look forward to catching up again.
Cheers, buddy.